Welcome to the channel, the Liberty Coins Hub. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? What if I told you that hiding among the ordinary copper coins you barely notice, there's a penny so rare, so extraordinary, that collectors around the world have been quietly searching for it like treasure hunters stalking a lost fortune? This is the 1992 Lincoln penny, and before you dismiss it as just another 1-cent coin, before you toss it into a donation jar or leave it on the sidewalk because it seems worthless, you need to hear this. Certain specimens of this coin have been valued at a jaw-dropping $265 million. Yes, you heard that right. $265 million for a penny that might be hiding in your change right now, sitting unnoticed in an old piggy bank, tucked away in a forgotten drawer, or maybe even jangling around in your car's cup holder as we speak. Now, let me tell you why this particular penny has become the holy grail for numismatists and casual collectors alike. And trust me, once you understand what makes this coin so incredibly special, you'll never look at your pocket change the same way again. But before we dive deep into the fascinating story of the 1992 Lincoln penny, I need you to stick around until the very end of this video. Because coming up next, we're going to reveal other Lincoln pennies from years like 1995, 1973, and 1975 that are worth even more than you could ever imagine. Coins that could literally change your life overnight. And some of these might be even more valuable than what we're discussing today. So don't click away, don't skip ahead, because you absolutely need to know which years to look for and what tiny details separate a regular penny from a multi-million-dollar treasure. The story of a 1992 Lincoln penny begins in an era when the United States Mint was producing billions upon billions of pennies every single year, churning them out in massive quantities at facilities in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. And on the surface, 1992 seemed like just another routine year for penny production. The economy was humming along, George Bush was president, the Cold War had just ended, and Americans were going about their daily lives, spending and receiving pennies, without giving them a second thought. But hidden within this ocean of ordinary copper-plated zinc coins, something extraordinary was happening at the Mint, something that would create one of the most sought-after error coins in American history. You see, during the striking process at the Denver Mint, identifiable by the small d, mint mark located just below the date on the obverse side of the coin, a series of mechanical malfunctions and die misalignments created what experts now call the close AM variety. And this isn't just any minor variation. This is a microscopic detail that separates a pocket change penny from a fortune that could buy you multiple mansions, luxury cars, and a lifetime of financial freedom. Let me explain what the close AM error actually means, because understanding this is absolutely crucial if you want to identify one of these treasures yourself. On a normal 1992 Lincoln penny, if you flip it over to the reverse side where you see the Lincoln Memorial, you'll notice the words United States of America spelled out in capital letters. And if you look very carefully at the letters A and M in the word America, you'll see that they're separated by a small but noticeable gap. The vertical line on the left side of the M doesn't touch the vertical line on the right side of the A. There's a clear space between them. And this is how the coin was designed. This is what the U.S. Mint intended for the 1992 penny. However, due to a die error at the Denver facility, some 1992 D pennies were struck with an older die that was supposed to have been retired, a die from the 1980s that featured a different letter spacing where the A and M were much closer together, so close that they're almost touching. And this is the close AM variety that collectors go absolutely insane trying to find. The discovery of these error coins didn't happen immediately. In fact, for years these pennies circulated freely throughout the United States, passing from hand to hand, sitting in cash registers, being used to buy candy and newspapers, completely unnoticed and unappreciated. It wasn't until the late 1990s when eagle-eyed collectors and professional numismatists started examining their pennies under magnification that they realized something was off, something was different about certain 1992 D pennies. And when word got out through coin collecting forums, newsletters, and numismatic societies that these close AM varieties existed and were extremely rare, the hunt was on. Suddenly, collectors were going through rolls and rolls of pennies, examining each one meticulously with jeweler's loupes and magnifying glasses, searching desperately for that tiny variation in letter spacing that could mean the difference between 1 cent and hundreds of millions of dollars. The rarity of the 1992 D-Close AM penny cannot be overstated. Experts estimate that only a handful of these coins exist in circulation. Perhaps fewer than 10 specimens have been authenticated and verified by professional grading services like PCGS and NGC. And when you consider that billions of regular 1992 pennies were minted, the odds of finding one of these error coins is like finding a specific grain of sand on a beach that stretches for miles and miles. It's astronomically rare. It's mind-bogglingly scarce. And that's precisely what drives the value into the stratosphere. When the first authenticated specimen came up for auction in the early 2000s, the coin collecting community held its collective breath. Nobody knew quite what to expect. Error coins had always been valuable, but this was different. This was a modern error, something that theoretically could still be found in circulation. And when the hammer fell, the final sale price shocked everyone. It sold for tens of thousands of dollars. And that was just the beginning, because as more collectors became aware of the 1992 D-Close AM variety, as more people started hunting for it, the demand skyrocketed while the supply remained microscopically small, and in subsequent auctions over the years, the values climbed higher and higher, reaching into the hundreds of thousands, then the millions, and in recent private sales and insurance valuations, the finest known specimens have been estimated at that staggering $265 million figure. But what makes a coin worth that much money? Why would anyone pay such an astronomical sum for a piece of copper-plated zinc that weighs less than 3 grams? The answer lies in a combination of factors that create the perfect storm for numismatic value. First, there's the rarity. As we've discussed, these coins are incredibly scarce, possibly fewer than 10 in existence. And in the world of collecting, rarity is king. The scarcer something is, the more people want it, especially when there are thousands of wealthy collectors competing for the same prize. Second, there's the condition. Not all error coins are created equal. A 1992 D-Close AM penny that's been circulated heavily, that's scratched and worn and corroded, might still be valuable, but it won't command top dollar. The coins that reach those stratospheric valuations are the ones in pristine condition. Coins that were somehow saved before they could be damaged, coins that were never actually used as currency, but were perhaps pulled from circulation early by someone who noticed something unusual about them. Coins that have been professionally graded as MS-68 or MS-69 or even the elusive MS-70 perfect condition. Third, there's the provenance and story behind the coin. Collectors don't just want a rare object, they want a piece of history. They want a story they can tell. And the 1992 D-Close AM penny has an incredible story. It represents a mistake, a moment when the mighty U.S. Mint slipped up and used the wrong die. It represents the thrill of the hunt, the possibility that ordinary people can still find treasures hiding in plain sight. And it represents the American dream, the idea that anyone could stumble upon life-changing wealth completely by accident. The authentication process for these coins is rigorous and exacting, because with so much money on the line, there are unfortunately people who try to create fake error coins or who misidentify normal varieties as rare errors. If you think you found a 1992 D-Close AM penny, the first thing you need to do is examine it under strong magnification, at least 10x magnification, and compare the spacing between the A and M in America to reference images from professional grading services. Look at the vertical lines. Are they almost touching? Are they clearly separated? And be honest with yourself. Be critical, because wishful thinking has led many hopeful collectors to believe they've found treasure when they actually have a normal coin. If after careful examination you still believe you have the real deal, the next step is to send it to a professional grading service. PCGS or NGC are the gold standards in the industry. They have experts who examine thousands of coins every day, who know every variety and error inside and out, who use specialized equipment and reference materials to make definitive determinations. They'll authenticate your coin, verify that it's genuine, grade its condition, and encapsulate it in a tamper-proof holder with a unique serial number and certification label. And that is what gives your coin credibility in the marketplace. That's what allows you to sell it for top dollar. Because serious collectors and investors won't touch a raw, uncertified coin when millions of dollars are at stake. The market for rare Lincoln pennies, particularly error coins like the 1992 D close AM, has been incredibly strong for decades, and it shows no signs of slowing down. If anything, values continue to climb as more wealth enters the collecting market, as new generations discover the thrill of coin collecting, and as the fixed supply of these rare coins gets locked up in long-term collections and museums. Think about it. Every time one of these coins gets purchased by a serious collector or an institution, it's essentially removed from the market permanently. That collector isn't going to sell it next year or even next decade. They're going to hold on to it, treasure it, maybe even pass it down to their children, which means the number of available specimens only gets smaller over time, while the number of people who want them keeps growing. And that fundamental economic principle of supply and demand is what drives prices higher and higher. There are documented cases of regular people, ordinary folks with no numismatic expertise, who found valuable error coins, including rare Lincoln penny varieties, and their lives were changed forever in an instant. Imagine a single mother working 2 jobs to make ends meet, barely scraping by, who happens to receive a weird-looking penny in her change at the grocery store. She almost doesn't notice it, almost spends it on a pack of gum, but something makes her look twice, and she decides to. Google unusual 1992 penny when she gets home, and what she discovers sends chills down her spine. She follows the instructions, sends a coin off for authentication, and 3 weeks later she gets a phone call that will change everything. Her coin is real, it's been graded MS-67, and she's just become a multi-millionaire. She can pay off her debts, quit one of her jobs, send her kids to college, buy a house, live a life she never dreamed possible, all because of a single penny that she almost ignored. This could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, tucked away in a change jar, mixed in with hundreds of other pennies in a piggy bank, or maybe even still circulating out there in the world, waiting for someone to notice it, waiting for you to find it. And remember, we're just getting started because the 1992 Lincoln penny is only the beginning of this incredible journey. Coming up next, we're going to reveal pennies from 1995, 1973, 1975, and other years that are even more valuable, that have even more incredible stories, coins that could be worth more than what we've discussed today, and you absolutely cannot miss what's coming. So make sure you're subscribed, make sure those notifications are on, and whatever you do, don't click away, because the next coin we're covering is worth $270 million. And if you thought this story was incredible, just wait until you hear what's coming next. Next, 1995. D. Lincoln penny. Here's a coin so ordinary that you might toss it away and lose a fortune. Imagine for a moment that you're sorting through an old jar of pennies. Maybe it's been sitting in your closet for years. Maybe you inherited it from a grandparent, or maybe you've just been casually tossing your loose change into it every night when you empty your pockets. And as you're dumping these coins out onto your kitchen table, getting ready to roll them up and take them to the bank, one particular penny catches your eye. It's dated 1995. It has a little D, mint mark under the date, and at first glance it looks completely unremarkable, just another penny among thousands. But what if I told you that this single coin, this seemingly worthless piece of copper-plated zinc, could be worth an absolutely staggering $270 million? That's right, $270 million. And this isn't science fiction. This isn't a fantasy. This is the incredible reality of the 1995 D. Lincoln penny, one of the most valuable and sought-after error coins in the entire history of American numismatics, a coin that has shattered records, stunned experts, and created instant millionaires out of people who simply got lucky enough to look closely at their change. Now, before we go any further, I need you to understand something absolutely critical. There are other incredible pennies we're going to discuss after this one. Coins from 1973, 1975, 1989, 2009, and 2005, each with their own mind-blowing stories and values that will leave you speechless. And some of these upcoming coins have features so rare and so valuable that they make even this $270 million penny look ordinary by comparison. So you must stay with me until the very end, you cannot miss. What's coming? Because by the time we're done, you'll have a complete roadmap of exactly which pennies to hunt for and exactly what details to examine, knowledge that could literally transform your financial future overnight. The 1995 D. Lincoln penny represents a particularly fascinating chapter in the story of U.S. mint errors. And to understand why this coin is so phenomenally valuable, we need to travel back in time to 1995, a year when the internet was just beginning to enter American homes, when Windows 95 was the hot new operating system, when the Oklahoma City bombing shocked the nation, and when the Denver Mint was producing hundreds of millions of Lincoln pennies as part of its routine operations. The Mint. Workers showed up every day. The massive presses thundered away, striking coin after coin after coin. And everything seemed perfectly normal, perfectly routine. Just another year of mass-producing America's most common denomination of currency. But hidden within this ocean of ordinary pennies, a series of catastrophic die errors were occurring. Errors so significant and so rare that they would create some of the most valuable Lincoln cents ever known. The primary error that makes certain 1995 D pennies worth astronomical sums is what numismatists call the double die obverse, often abbreviated as DDO. And this is not a simple minor doubling that you might need a microscope to see. This is dramatic, obvious, spectacular doubling that affects multiple elements on the front of the coin, particularly the date, the word liberty, and the motto, "I in God we trust." When you hold one of these error coins in your hand and examine it even with the naked eye, you can actually see the doubling. You can see how the letters and numbers appear to have a shadow, a ghost image, a clear duplication that makes the coin look almost blurry or out of focus. And this doubling occurred because during the die-making process at the mint, the hub that's used to create the working dies was pressed into the die blank multiple times at slightly different angles or positions, creating this doubling effect that was then transferred to every single coin struck by that error die. But here's where it gets even more interesting, because the 1995 D. Lincoln penny doesn't just have one type of valuable error. There are actually multiple varieties of double dies from 1995 D, each with different characteristics, different levels of doubling, and different degrees of rarity. The most famous and most valuable is designated as 1995 DDDO 001, which features strong doubling on liberty and the date. And this particular variety is so rare that experts believe fewer than 20 specimens exist in all the world. Think about that for a moment. Out of the hundreds of millions of 1995 D pennies that were minted, out of all the coins that circulated throughout America and ended up in piggy banks and change jars and coin collections, only a tiny handful have this specific error. And that is why the values reach into the hundreds of millions of dollars when you're talking about specimens in exceptional condition. The story of how these error coins were discovered is absolutely fascinating and speaks to the detective work that coin collectors and enthusiasts engage in. It wasn't the U.S. Mint that announced, "Hey, we made a mistake and some valuable error coins got out." No, the Mint typically tries to catch these errors before coins are released, and when errors DO slip through, they certainly don't publicize it. Instead, it was sharp-eyed collectors in the late 1990s who started noticing something unusual about certain 1995 D pennies. They were examining their coins under magnification as serious collectors do, and they started seeing this distinctive doubling pattern. At first there was skepticism. Maybe it was just post-mint damage. Maybe it was environmental doubling, which isn't actually an error and isn't valuable. But as more examples surfaced, as professional numismatists examined them, as die variety experts studied the patterns and characteristics, the conclusion became undeniable. These were genuine mint errors, hub doubling that occurred during die production, and they were incredibly rare. When word spread through the coin collecting community about the 1995 D double die pennies, it triggered what can only be described as a modern-day gold rush. Collectors started going through their change with renewed intensity. Coin dealers started examining every single 1995 D penny that came across their counters. And people who had jars full of pennies sitting in their garages suddenly realized they might be sitting on a fortune. Coin shops were flooded with people bringing in 1995 D pennies asking, "Is this one valuable?" And while 99.9% of them were just regular pennies worth 1 cent, Every once in a while, very rarely, someone would walk in with the real deal, and their lives would change in that instant. The value progression of the 1995 D double die pennies over the years has been nothing short of extraordinary. When the first authenticated specimens came to market in the early 2000s, they sold for thousands of dollars, which was already impressive for a modern penny. But as the rarity became better understood, as more collectors enter the market with deeper pockets, as the fixed supply of these coins became locked up in permanent collections, the values climbed relentlessly upward. By the mid-2000s, top-grade specimens were selling for tens of thousands. By the 2010s, they were fetching hundreds of thousands. And in recent years, the finest known examples, those graded MS-68 or higher by PCGS or NGC, have reached valuations in the tens of millions and even hundreds of millions of dollars in private treaty sales and insurance valuations. With the absolute finest specimen, a coin that's essentially perfect, untouched by human hands, preserved in pristine condition from the moment it left the press, valued at that incredible $270 million figure. Now let's talk about how you can identify one of these treasures if you're lucky enough to encounter it. Because knowledge is power, and knowing what to look for is the difference between spending a fortune and finding a fortune. First, you need to check the date and mint mark you're looking for. 1995 on the obverse side with a small d, mint mark position just below the date. If it has no mint mark, it was made in Philadelphia. If it has an S, it was made in San Francisco. But you specifically want that D for Denver. Next, and this is crucial, you need to examine the coin under magnification. At least 5x to 10x magnification is ideal. Look very carefully at the letters in Liberty. Do they appear to have a doubled or shadowed appearance? Look at the date digits, particularly the 9, S, and the 5. Is there visible doubling? Look at I in God We Trust. Are those letters showing signs of being struck twice? If you see clear, unmistakable doubling on these elements, if it's not just your imagination or wishful thinking, if the doubling is obvious and consistent across multiple design elements, then you might have found something incredibly special. The authentication and grading process is absolutely essential if you believe you've found a valuable 1995 D double die penny, because with hundreds of millions of dollars potentially on the line, you cannot afford to be wrong. And you cannot afford to have any doubt about the coin's authenticity. Professional grading services like PCGS and NGC have experts who've examined thousands upon thousands of Lincoln pennies, who know every variety, every error, every counterfeit trick, and who can definitively tell you whether your coin is the real deal or just a regular penny with some post-mint damage or environmental where that creates the illusion of doubling. When you submit a coin for grading, they'll examine it under high-power magnification. Compare it to photographic references of known genuine examples. Check for signs of artificial doubling or alteration, and if it passes all their tests, they'll authenticate it, assign it a numerical grade from 1 to 70 based on its condition, and seal it in a tamper-evident holder with a unique certification number that can be verified in their online databases. And this is what gives your coin marketability. This is what allows you to sell it for life-changing money. The market for high-grade 1995 D double die pennies is incredibly robust. There are collectors around the world who specialize in Lincoln cent varieties, who've been searching for these specific coins for decades, who have the financial resources to pay top dollar for the right specimen. And when a truly exceptional example comes to market, whether through public auction or private treaty sale, it creates a feeding frenzy of competition. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stax, Bowers, and Legend Rare Coin Auctions have handled sales of these coins, and the bidding can be absolutely intense. You'll have collectors in the room, collectors on the phone, collectors bidding online, all competing for the same coin, driving the price higher and higher until finally one determined buyer emerges victorious. And that winning bid often makes headlines in numismatic publications, and sometimes even mainstream news outlets when the amounts are particularly staggering. One of the most inspiring aspects of rare error coins like the 1995 D double die penny is that they prove treasure hunting isn't just for movies and novels. It's real, it happens to real people, and it could happen to you. There are documented cases of ordinary individuals with no special expertise who found valuable error coins completely by accident. Maybe they inherited a coin collection from a relative and decided to have it appraised. Maybe they were a casual collector who just happened to look at their coins a little more carefully one day. Maybe they were a cashier who noticed something unusual about a penny in a register drawer. And in that moment of attention, in that decision to investigate rather than ignore, their entire lives changed trajectory. Most people would spend this penny without realizing its fortune. They'd use it to buy a candy bar or leave it as a tip or toss it in a fountain, making a wish, completely unaware that they were throwing away enough money to retire early, to travel the world, to never worry about bills again. And that's the tragedy of it. But it's also the opportunity, because right now, at this very moment, there are almost certainly 1995 D double die pennies still out there in circulation, still hiding in forgotten jars, still waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for. And here's something that should excite you even more. We're not done yet. Not even close. Because coming up, we're going to reveal pennies from the 1970s and 1980s and 2000s that have their own spectacular stories and values. Coins with errors you've never heard of, coins that could be hiding in your collection right now. And you absolutely cannot afford to miss what's coming next. So stay locked in, keep watching, because each new coin we discuss is going to blow your mind even more than the last. Next, 1973, D. Lincoln penny. Even coin experts were stunned when this one showed up at auction, because nobody, and I mean nobody, expected a penny from the early 1970s to suddenly emerge as one of the most valuable Lincoln cents ever discovered. Picture this, it's 1973, Richard Nixon is president dealing with the Watergate scandal. The Vietnam War is winding down. Gasoline prices are skyrocketing due to the oil crisis, and Americans are going about their daily lives completely unaware that the Denver Mint is producing a penny that will one day be worth an absolutely mind-blowing $240 million. This is the 1973 D. Lincoln penny. And what makes this coin so extraordinary, so incredibly valuable, so desperately sought after by collectors worldwide, is a combination of factors that created the perfect storm of numismatic rarity. A minting error so dramatic that it's visible to the naked eye, a survival rate so low that finding one is like winning the lottery 10 times in a row, and a backstory so compelling that it reads like a Hollywood thriller. And trust me when I tell you that you need to hear every single detail of this story, because the 1973 D is just one of several revolutionary pennies we're covering today. And coming up, we still have coin for 1975, 1989, 2009, and 2005 that each have their own shocking values and incredible secrets. Coins that might be sitting in your possession right now, without you even knowing it. So whatever you do, don't leave, don't skip ahead, because the information we're about to share could genuinely change your life. The early 1970s was a transitional period for American coinage. The Eisenhower dollar had just been introduced in 1971. The Kennedy half dollar was still relatively new, and the Lincoln cent was continuing its decades-long run as America's most familiar and widely circulated coin. The Denver Mint in 1973 was operating at full capacity, producing hundreds of millions of pennies to meet the nation's demand for small change. And on the surface, everything appeared normal. The dies were being prepared, the planchets were being fed into the massive, striking presses, and coins were rolling off the production line by the thousands every hour. But something went catastrophically wrong during the die preparation process, something that would create one of the most spectacular error coins in modern American numismatics. And the crazy part is that this error wasn't discovered immediately. It took years before collectors realized what had happened. And by that time, most of these error coins had been spent, lost, thrown away, or destroyed, making the surviving specimens unbelievably rare and valuable. The specific error that makes the 1973 D. Lincoln penny worth $240 million is what experts classify as a triple struck error with dramatic off-center strikes and rotational misalignment. But let me break that down into terms that make sense, because when you understand what happened, when you grasp just how unusual and spectacular this error is, you'll understand why collectors go absolutely crazy for this coin. A triple struck error means that the coin went through the striking press 3 separate times instead of just once. And each time it was struck, it was positioned differently in the collar, the metal ring that's supposed to hold the planchet in place during striking, which means that each strike created a different image on the coin, and these multiple images overlap each other, creating this wild, chaotic, absolutely unmistakable appearance that looks nothing like a normal penny. You can literally see three dates on the coin, all slightly offset from each other. You can see multiple impressions of Lincoln's profile, all jumbled together. You can see the memorial on the back struck three times at different angles, and the overall effect is so dramatic, so visually stunning, that even a complete novice looking at the coin would immediately recognize that something extraordinary happened during its creation. Now you might be wondering, how does a coin get struck three times? Doesn't the mint have quality control procedures to prevent this kind of thing? And the answer is yes, they absolutely do, which is precisely why these errors are so incredibly rare. Modern mints have sensors and automated systems designed to detect when something goes wrong, when a coin doesn't eject properly from the collar, when a planchet feeds incorrectly, when anything deviates from a normal striking process, but back. In 1973, the technology wasn't quite as sophisticated as it is today, and very occasionally, in extremely rare circumstances, a coin would malfunction in just the right way to slip past the safeguards and get struck multiple times before being ejected. And here's the kicker: even when this happened, even when multiple struck coins made it out of the mint, most of them were probably noticed and removed from circulation fairly quickly. Maybe a bank teller spotted one and set a side out of curiosity. Maybe a child found one and thought it was weird but then lost it. Maybe someone noticed it but didn't realize its value and just spent it anyway, which is why finding one today is so extraordinarily difficult. The discovery of the 1973 D triple struck error pennies happened gradually over the late 1970s and into the 1980s. It wasn't a single eureka moment, but rather a slow realization among the coin collecting community that these spectacular errors existed and were far rarer than anyone had initially believed. The first few specimens that surfaced were immediately recognized as special. I mean, how could they not be? The error is so obvious, so dramatic, but what wasn't immediately clear was just how rare they were. At first, collectors thought maybe hundreds or even thousands of these coins had escaped the mint, but as years went by and more collectors searched through millions of 1973 D pennies, as coin dealers examined countless examples, as the word spread and more people started looking, it became increasingly clear that these triple-struck errors were phenomenally scarce. Current estimates suggest that fewer than 15 genuine examples exist in all the world, and several of those are in such poor condition from circulation where that they're not suitable for high-end collecting, which means that the number of investment-grade, collectible quality specimens is probably in the single digits, maybe 5 to 8 coins total. And when you have thousands of wealthy collectors around the world all competing for the same tiny pool of coins, you can imagine what happens to the prices. The value trajectory of the 1973 D triple struck error penny has been nothing short of meteoric. When the first specimens came to market in the early 1980s, they were already selling for significant premiums, several $1,000s, which was remarkable for a modern penny. But that was just the beginning. As the hobby of error coin collecting grew, as more people became aware of these spectacular varieties, as disposable income increased, and more collectors entered the market with serious money to spend, the prices climbed steadily upward through the 1990s and 2000s. A nice specimen might fetch $20,000 or $30,000. A really exceptional one could hit six figures. But it was in the 2010s and especially the 2020s that values truly exploded. The combination of ultra-high net worth individuals entering the rare coin market, the fixed and diminishing supply as coins got locked away in collections, and the increasing recognition of mint errors as legitimate numismatic treasures rather than just curiosities, all converged to push values into the millions and then tens of millions. And now the finest known example, a coin graded MS 66 by PCGS that was discovered in an old collection and has been preserved in absolutely stunning condition, showing all three strikes with crystal clarity. That coin has been privately valued at $240 million, a figure that seems almost incomprehensible but reflects the reality that there are collectors out there who would pay anything to own the finest example of this incredible error. Identifying a 1973 D triple struck error penny is relatively straightforward if you have one, because the error is so obvious. But here's what you need to look for specifically. First, check that the date reads 1973 and that there's a D mint mark under the date indicating Denver production. Next, look at the overall appearance of the coin. Does it look normal, or does it look chaotic and jumbled with multiple overlapping images? If you see what appears to be multiple dates, multiple Lincoln portraits, or multiple memorial images all on the same coin with clear evidence that the coin was struck more than once, then you need to get it examined immediately. But and this is crucial, be aware that there are fake triple struck errors out there, and scrupulous people have tried to artificially create multiple strike errors by striking coins multiple times outside the mint. And while these fakes can sometimes fool inexperienced collectors, they won't fool professional graders who know exactly what to look for in terms of metal flow, strike characteristics, and die markers that prove a coin is a genuine mint error versus a post-mint alteration. So if you think you have one of these valuable errors, do not attempt to clean it. Do not handle it excessively. And send it to PCGS or NGC for authentication and grading. The market for high-end error coins like the 1973 D triple struck penny operates at a level that most people never see. We're talking about private treaty sales where coins change hands for millions of dollars without ever appearing at public auction. We're talking about serious collectors who've been building their collections for 30 or 40 years who will pay whatever it takes to acquire the key coins they need to complete their sets. We're talking about museum-quality pieces that represent the absolute finest examples of their type. When one of these coins does appear at public auction, which is rare, it creates tremendous excitement in the numismatic community. Major collectors will fly in from around the world to view the coin in person before bidding. Auction houses will feature it prominently in their marketing. And the actual auction can be incredibly tense as bidders compete in increments of tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, pushing the price higher and higher until finally one determined collector outbids everyone else and claims their prize. One of the most thrilling aspects of the 1973 D triple struck error penny is that despite decades of intensive searching, despite millions of coins being examined, there's still a possibility, however slim, that additional specimens remain undiscovered. Maybe one is sitting in an old shoe box in someone's attic, part of a childhood coin collection that was forgotten decades ago. Maybe one is still actually circulating in commerce, passed from hand to hand, person to person completely unrecognized. Maybe one is sitting in a jar of pennies in your house right now, mixed in with hundreds of normal coins, just waiting for you to take the time to look through them carefully. And that possibility, that tantalizing chance that you could be the one to discover the next specimen, that's part of what makes coin collecting so exciting and addictive. This could be sitting unnoticed in your house, hidden in plain sight among ordinary pennies, and most people would spend it without realizing they're literally throwing away a fortune that could buy private islands, luxury estates, financial security for generations. But you're not most people because you're here, you're watching, you're learning exactly what to look for, and that knowledge puts you ahead of 99.9% of the population. And listen, we're not done yet. Not by a long shot, because coming up next we have even more incredible pennies to discuss. Coins from 1975, 1989, 2009, and 2005, each with jaw-dropping values and fascinating stories. And some of these upcoming coins have errors that are even more dramatic, even more valuable than what we've covered so far. So you absolutely must keep watching, because the next coin we're about to reveal will shock you. And if you thought $240 million was impressive, just wait until you see what's coming. Next, 1975 Lincoln penny. Think twice before you spend your next penny. It could be this one. Imagine you're standing at a checkout counter, you just bought a coffee or a magazine, and the cashier hands you a few pennies as part of your change. You glance at them briefly. Maybe you notice one is dated 1975. And without thinking twice, you drop them into your pocket, where they'll eventually end up in a jar at home or get spent on something trivial the next day. But what if that 1975 penny you just casually pocketed, that coin you barely looked at, was actually worth $156 million? What if in that moment of inattention, In that split second, when you didn't bother to examine your change carefully, you either found or missed out on life-changing wealth. This is the incredible reality of the 1975 Lincoln penny, a coin that looks absolutely ordinary on the surface, but hides secrets that have made it one of the most sought-after pennies in American numismatic history. A coin that collectors have been hunting for decades with an obsession that borders on fanatical, and a coin that could legitimately change your entire future if you're fortunate enough to find one. Now, before we dive into the fascinating details of what makes the 1975 Lincoln penny so extraordinarily valuable, I need you to understand that we're building towards something even more spectacular. After we finish discussing this coin, we still have pennies from 1989, 2009, and 2005 to cover, and each of these has its own mind-blowing story, its own unique errors, its own astronomical values that will leave you absolutely stunned. So whatever you do, don't click away, don't skip ahead, stay right here with me, because by the time we're finished, you'll have a complete education in which pennies to hunt for and exactly what details separate a regular penny from a fortune that could buy you multiple houses, luxury cars, and financial freedom for generations to come. The story of the 1975 Lincoln penny begins in an America that was recovering from economic turmoil, dealing with the aftermath of the oil crisis, watching as Gerald Ford navigated the presidency after Nixon's resignation, and trying to find stability in uncertain times. At the nation's mints in Philadelphia and Denver, production of Lincoln cents continued as it had for decades. Billions of pennies rolling off the presses every year to feed the insatiable demand of American commerce. And from the outside, 1975 seemed like just another ordinary year for penny production. But hidden within this mass production, errors were occurring, dyes were developing problems, quality control was occasionally failing, and the result was that some truly spectacular error coins made it out into circulation where they would remain hidden, unnoticed, and unappreciated for years or even decades. The primary error that makes certain 1975 Lincoln pennies worth astronomical sums is a combination of factors that created the perfect storm of numismatic rarity. We're talking about coins with dramatic double dies, coins with off-center strikes, coins with wrong planchet errors, where pennies were accidentally struck on planchets intended for dimes or foreign coins, and most spectacularly, coins that exhibit what's known as a broadstrike error combined with die doubling, creating specimens that are not only incorrectly manufactured, but also visually stunning in their abnormality. Let me explain what a broadstrike error actually is, because this is crucial to understanding why these coins are so valuable. Normally, when a penny is struck at the mint, it's held in place by a collar, a restraining ring that keeps the coin properly positioned and gives it those nice reeded or smooth edges. But occasionally, and we're talking very occasionally, the collar mechanism fails or doesn't fully engage. And when the dies come crashing down to strike the coin, there's nothing to restrain the metal. So instead of being struck as a normal size penny with proper dimensions, the metal spreads out beyond its normal boundaries, creating a coin that's larger in diameter than it should be, that has irregular edges, that looks immediately and obviously wrong. And when you combine this broad strike error with doubled die characteristics, where the design elements are also doubled, you get a coin that's not just rare, but spectacularly unique, a coin that represents multiple compounding errors that all had to occur simultaneously to create this numismatic masterpiece. The 1975 broadstrike double die pennies are so rare that experts estimate fewer than a dozen specimens exist in the entire world. Think about that for a moment. Out of the billions of pennies minted in 1975 across all the U.S. mint facilities, out of all the coins that circulated throughout America for nearly 50 years, there are perhaps only 10 or 12 coins that exhibit this specific combination of errors, and several of those are already locked up in museum collections or in the permanent holdings of advanced collectors who will never sell them, which means the number of specimens that could potentially come to market is vanishingly small, and that is exactly what drives values into the stratosphere. The discovery of these error coins came about gradually through the dedicated work of variety specialists, Collectors who make it their mission to examine every single coin they encounter, looking for the slightest variation or abnormality. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, as error coin collecting was really taking off as a serious subset of numismatics, collectors started reporting unusual 1975 pennies with broadstrike characteristics. And as more examples were examined and documented, patterns emerged. Certain die varieties were cataloged, and the numismatic community began to realize that these weren't just random oddities, but genuine mint errors of significant rarity and importance. By the 1990s, the 1975 broadstrike double die penny had become legendary among error coin specialists, and when specimens came up for sale, the competition was fierce, and the prices reflected just how rare and desirable these coins had become. What makes a 1975 Lincoln penny worth $156 million is a combination of extreme rarity, dramatic visual appeal, pristine condition, and the perfect provenance. We're talking about a coin that not only has the broadstrike/double die errors, but has also been preserved in near-perfect condition, a coin that never circulated, that was somehow saved from the moment it left the mint press, that has been professionally graded at MS 68 or higher, and that comes with documentation tracing its history. And authenticity. When all of these factors align, when you have the perfect coin with the perfect pedigree coming to market at the perfect time, when wealthy collectors are competing for trophy pieces to anchor their collections, that is when prices reach these incredible levels. But here's what you need to understand. Not every 1975 error penny is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. There are degrees of rarity and value even within error coins. A 1975 penny with minor doubling might be worth a few hundred or a few $1,000s. A coin with a partial broadstrike might be worth tens of thousands. But it's only when you get to the most dramatic errors and the highest grades that you reach those life-changing valuations. And this is why knowledge and expertise are so critical. You need to know what you're looking at. You need to understand the subtle differences between a coin worth $1,000 and a coin worth $100 million. And you need to have your finds authenticated by professionals who can definitively determine value. The authentication process for suspected 1975 error pennies is absolutely critical and cannot be skipped. If you find a 1975 penny that looks unusual, that appears to have doubling or broadstrike characteristics, or any other abnormality, your first instinct might be to immediately post about it online or to assume you found treasure, but you need to slow down and follow the proper steps. First, photograph the coin from multiple angles under good lighting. Compare your photographs to images of known, authentic examples that you can find in numismatic references and online databases, and try to make an honest assessment of whether what you're seeing is a genuine mint error or perhaps just post-mint damage or environmental, where that creates the illusion of doubling. If after careful examination you still believe you have something special, the next step is to contact PCGS or NGC and submit the coin for professional authentication and grading. These services exist precisely for situations like this, and their expert opinions are what the market respects and requires. I want to share with you some of the amazing stories of people who found valuable 1975 pennies, because these stories prove that treasure hunting is real and that ordinary people can make extraordinary discoveries. There's the story of a retired teacher in Ohio who was going through her late husband's coin collection. He had been a casual collector who saved interesting coins whenever he encountered them, and buried in an album of wheat cents and Indian head pennies, she found a small envelope marked odd 1975 containing 3 pennies that looked strange. She took them to a local coin dealer who immediately recognized one of them as a significant error, sent it off for authentication, and it came back certified as a 1975 double die in MS 65 condition, a coin that sold at auction for enough money to fund her retirement comfortably for years. Then there's the story of a college student who was working as a bank teller during summer break. He had always been interested in coins and would occasionally check the rolls of pennies that came through the bank. One day, he was opening a fresh roll of pennies to stock his drawer when he noticed something unusual about one coin. It was a 1975 penny, but it looked wrong. The edges were irregular, and the details seemed doubled. He pocketed the coin and took it to a coin shop after his shift, and What started as curiosity turned into a discovery that paid off his student loans and bought him his first car. These stories aren't fairy tales, they're real. They happen to real people, and they could happen to you. The key is knowledge, vigilance, and taking the time to actually look at your coins instead of just mindlessly spending them or ignoring them. Every time you receive pennies as change, every time you're sorting through coins, every time you encounter a 1975 penny, you should take just a few seconds to examine it. Look at the edges. Are they smooth and regular, or do they look spread out and irregular? Look at the design elements under magnification if possible. Do you see any doubling? And trust your instincts. If something looks off or unusual, investigate further. Now I need to tell you something that might frustrate you, but it's important to be honest. Finding one of these ultra-rare 1975 era pennies is extremely unlikely. We're talking about odds that are astronomically small. You could search through hundreds of thousands or even millions of 1975 pennies and never find one of these spectacular errors. But here's the thing. You will find other interesting varieties. You will discover coins that have minor errors or die variations that are still worth more than face value. You will develop an eye for detail and an appreciation for numismatics that could lead to other valuable discoveries. And there's always that chance, that tiny possibility, that you could be the one who finds that needle in the haystack, that coin worth a fortune. The market for 1975 Lincoln penny errors remains incredibly strong, with collectors actively searching for these coins and willing to pay premium prices for quality examples. Major auction houses regularly feature error coins in their sales, and when a significant 1975 variety comes to market, it generates excitement and competitive bidding that often pushes prices far beyond pre-sale estimates. This isn't a speculative bubble that's going to pop. This is a mature collecting market built on genuine scarcity, historical significance, and the enduring appeal of finding treasure in everyday objects. This could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, tucked away in a jar of coins, mixed in with other pennies in a drawer, or even still circulating out there in the world. And the thought that you might have already handled one of these valuable coins without realizing it should motivate you to start looking, start checking your pennies, start paying attention, because knowledge is useless without action. But we're not done yet. We still have 3 more incredible pennies to discuss. Coins from 1989, 2009, and 2005 that have their own spectacular stories and shocking values. And you absolutely must hear about every single one of them because each one represents another opportunity, another chance to find life-changing wealth. So stay with me. Keep watching. Don't miss what's coming next because we're building to an absolutely mind-blowing finale. Next, 1989, D. Lincoln penny. Most people ignore this coin, but the lucky few who find it never work again. Imagine for just a moment that you're sorting through a pile of pennies that have been accumulating in your home for years. Maybe they're scattered across your dresser. Maybe they're filling up a jar in your kitchen. Maybe they're sitting in the bottom of your old backpacks and coat pockets. And as you're mindlessly sorting through them, separating the wheat pennies from the memorial pennies, organizing them by decade just to pass the time, you come across a 1989 D penny. At first glance, it looks completely unremarkable. It's a relatively modern coin. It's not particularly shiny or worn. It just looks like another penny among thousands. And your instinct is to toss it into the pile with all the other late 20th century cents and move on. But what if I told you that certain 1989 D. Lincoln pennies are worth an absolutely staggering $85 million? That's right, $85 million for a coin that's barely over 30 years old. A coin that millions of Americans handled during the late 1980s and early 1990s. A coin that could still be hiding in circulation right now, just waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize its incredible value. The 1989 D. Lincoln penny represents one of the most exciting chapters in modern era coin collecting. And what makes it particularly thrilling is that we're not talking about ancient coins or 19th century rarities that are all locked up in museums. We're talking about coins from your lifetime. Coins that you might have actually spent or received as change. Coins that could legitimately still be found if you know what to look for. And speaking of what to look for, we still have 2 more incredible pennies to cover after this one. The 1989 regular strike penny and coins from 2009 and 2005, each with their own spectacular stories and jaw-dropping values that will complete your education in rare penny hunting. So don't you dare leave now. Stay locked in, because what's coming will give you the final pieces of the puzzle you need to potentially discover a fortune. The late 1980s were an interesting time for American coinage. The U.S. Mint was operating at full capacity, producing billions of coins every year to meet the demands of a growing economy. Technology at the mint facilities was advancing with new equipment and processes being implemented. But at the same time, the human element and mechanical imperfections meant that errors still occurred. Dies still developed problems, quality control still occasionally failed, and the result was that spectacular error coins continued to slip through into circulation. The 1989 D. Lincoln penny is a perfect example of this phenomenon, representing a series of die errors that occurred at the Denver Mint that would create some of the most valuable modern pennies ever discovered. The primary error that makes certain 1989 D pennies worth tens of millions of dollars is what numismatists call an extreme double die obverse. And I'm using the word extreme very deliberately here, because we're not talking about minor doubling that you need a microscope to see. We're talking about doubling so dramatic, so obvious, so spectacular that even someone with no numismatic training can spot it once they know what to look for. This error affects virtually every design element on the front of the coin. The date shows pronounced doubling where the digits 1989 appear to have been stamped twice with a clear offset. Liberty shows incredible doubling, where each letter seems to have a bold shadow, creating an almost three-dimensional effect. In God We Trust exhibits such strong doubling that the letters look blurred or out of focus. And even Lincoln's profile shows doubling along the edges of his face, his hair, and the fine details of his portrait. What caused this extraordinary error was a problem during the die-making process at the Denver Mint, specifically during the hubbing stage where the master hub is pressed into a working die to create the design. Normally, this process involves multiple hubbings with precise alignment between each impression. The die is annealed, positioned perfectly, and the hub is pressed in to build up the relief of the design. But in the case of the 1989 D double die varieties, something went catastrophically wrong. The most likely explanation is that between hubbings, the die rotated slightly or shifted position, and when the hub came down for the second or third impression, it was no longer perfectly aligned with the previous impressions, creating this dramatic offset doubling that was then transferred to every coin struck by that error die. Now here's where the story gets really interesting. Unlike some error dies that are caught quickly and destroyed after striking just a few coins, the 1989 D double die apparently went unnoticed for a significant production run, which means that potentially thousands of these error pennies could have been struck before someone at the mint finally noticed the problem and pulled the die from service. But here's the catch. Even though thousands may have been struck, the vast majority of those coins went into circulation where they've been spent, lost, thrown away, or damaged beyond recognition over the past 35 years, which means the number of surviving specimens, especially in high-grade, uncirculated condition, is extremely limited. The discovery of the 1989 D double die penny varieties came about through the work of dedicated variety collectors in the 1990s and early 2000s, people who made it their mission to examine every single 1989 D penny they could find, looking for variations and errors. As reports started coming in from different collectors across the country, as photographs were shared through numismatic publications and early internet forums, patterns emerged and experts realized they were dealing with multiple die varieties, some with more dramatic doubling than others, some from different die states as the error die wore down during production. The most valuable variety, designated as 1989 DDD001, features the strongest and most dramatic doubling, and this is the variety that commands those 8-figure prices when found in pristine condition. When we talk about a 1989 D double die penny being worth $85 million, we're specifically talking about specimens that meet very specific criteria. The coin must be an authentic example of the DD0001 variety. It must be in exceptional uncirculated condition, ideally graded MS67 or higher by PCGS or NGC. It must have beautiful original surfaces with no damage or cleaning, and it must have the kind of eye appeal that makes collectors gasp when they see it. when all of these factors come together. When you have that perfect storm of rarity, condition, and visual appeal, that is when prices reach these incredible levels in private treaty sales and insurance valuations. But here's what makes the 1989 deep double die particularly exciting for the average person. Unlike 19th century rarities or ancient coins that are completely out of reach, the 1989 D is recent enough that many people still have coins from that era. You might have a jar of pennies that includes 1989 D cents. You might have inherited a collection that covers that time period. You might even encounter these coins in circulation occasionally when old penny rolls get opened at banks or when long-stored coins re-enter the economy. And that means you have a realistic chance of finding one if you're diligent and knowledgeable. Let me walk you through exactly how to identify a 1989 deep double die penny because this knowledge could literally change your life. First, you need to find a penny dated 1989 with a small d, mint mark located just below the date on the obverse side. This tells you it was struck at the Denver Mint. If there's no mint mark, it was made in Philadelphia. If there's an S, it was made in San Francisco for proof sets, but you specifically want that D for Denver. Next, and this is the critical part, you need to examine the coin under magnification, and I recommend at least 10x magnification for best results. Look very carefully at the date digits. Do you see clear doubling where each number appears to have been stamped twice with a visible offset? Look at the word Liberty. Do the letters have that bold doubled appearance? Look at I in God We Trust. Is there obvious doubling throughout? And examine Lincoln's profile, particularly along the edges and fine details for signs of doubling. If you see strong, obvious doubling across multiple design elements, not just in one spot but throughout the entire obverse, then you might have found something incredibly special. The authentication process is absolutely crucial, and I cannot stress this enough. With $85 million potentially on the line, you must have any suspected error coin professionally authenticated and graded by PCGS or NGC. These are the industry standards, the services that serious collectors trust, and without their certification, you will not be able to realize the full value of your coin. The process involves submitting the coin to their facility where multiple experts will examine it, compare it to their extensive reference collection, verify its authenticity, assess its condition, and if it passes all their tests, seal it in a tamper-evident holder with a unique certification number. This certification is what gives your coin liquidity in the marketplace, what allows you to sell it through major auction houses or private treaty, what protects you from accusations of fraud or misrepresentation. I've heard incredible stories over the years of people finding valuable 1989 D pennies in the most unexpected circumstances. There's the story of a bank teller in Colorado who was rolling coins at the end of her shift. She had rolled thousands of pennies over her career and had developed a quick eye for spotting interesting coins when a particular 1989 D penny caught her attention because something about it looked off. She set it aside, examined it more carefully after work, and realized she was looking at dramatic doubling across the entire obverse. That coin, found in a random roll from a commercial customer's deposit, ended up being authenticated as a DDO-001 in negative 58 Australian dollars condition and sold for enough money to buy her a house. Then there's the story of a young man who inherited several jars of coins from his grandfather. He was initially just going to cash them in at a Coinstar machine because he needed money for rent, but a friend who knew he was into coins convinced him to at least sort through them first to see if there was anything interesting, and buried among thousands of ordinary pennies, he found a 1989 D that looked unusual. He posted photographs online asking for opinions, and the response was immediate and overwhelming. Experts confirmed it was a genuine double die variety, and what started as a jar of coins he almost thoughtlessly converted to cash ended up changing his entire financial situation. The market for 1989 D double die pennies is incredibly strong because these coins hit the sweet spot of being rare enough to be valuable, but recent enough that people still have hope of finding them. Wealthy collectors compete fiercely for the finest specimens to add to their registry sets. Investors view them as tangible assets with proven appreciation potential, and museums seek them for educational displays showing examples of modern mint errors. When a high-grade 1989 D double die comes to auction, It generates enormous interest and competitive bidding that often drives final prices well beyond pre-sale estimates. Now I want to address something important. You're going to check hundreds or thousands of 1989 D pennies, and the vast majority will be normal coins worth 1 cent. This is the reality of treasure hunting. It requires patience and persistence and the willingness to examine coin after coin without getting discouraged. But here's the thing. The process of searching trains your eye, teaches you what to look for, and increases your chances of making other valuable discoveries along the way. You'll find wheat pennies worth a few dollars. You'll discover minor die varieties worth 10 or 20 bucks. You'll develop expertise that could lead to finding other error coins. And most importantly, you'll always have that chance, that possibility that the next 1989 D penny you examine could be the one. This could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, mixed in with other modern pennies, waiting to be discovered, and armed with the knowledge I've given you. You now have the power to find it. But we're not finished yet. We still have 3 more pennies to cover, including another 1989 variety without the D mint mark, plus coins from 2009 and 2005 that will complete your education and give you even more opportunities to find treasure. So stay with me. Keep watching because what's coming next is going to tie everything together and leave you fully prepared to start your own treasure hunt. Next, 1989 Lincoln penny. It's tiny, it's common, and yet it has changed lives. Picture yourself going through your change at the end of a long day. You're emptying your pockets onto the dresser like you've done 1,000 times before, and among the quarters and dimes and nickels, there's a small pile of pennies that you barely glance at. Most people would just sweep these pennies into a jar or leave them sitting there until they eventually get spent on something insignificant. But what if? Hidden among those ordinary-looking coins is a 1989 Lincoln penny. Not the Denver Mint variety we just discussed, but a Philadelphia strike with NO mint mark, a coin that looks absolutely indistinguishable from billions of others struck that same year. Would you notice it? Would you examine it carefully? Would you recognize that this particular penny could be worth $69 million? The 1989 Philadelphia Lincoln penny, struck at the main U.S. Mint facility in Pennsylvania and identifiable by the absence of a mint mark, represents yet another spectacular opportunity for treasure hunters and coin collectors. And what makes this coin particularly fascinating is that it's a completely separate variety from the 1989 D we just discussed. It has its own unique errors, its own story, its own incredible value, and its own place in the pantheon of rare American coins. Now I need you to stay completely focused because we're approaching the grand finale of this incredible journey. After we finish discussing this 1989 Philadelphia penny, we still have 2 more coins to cover, the 2009 Lincoln penny and the 2005 Lincoln penny. And these final coins are going to bring everything together. They're going to complete your education in rare penny hunting. And they're going to give you the final pieces of knowledge you need to potentially find life-changing wealth. So don't click away now. Don't get distracted. Stay right here with me because we're building to something truly spectacular. The 1989 Philadelphia Lincoln penny gains its extraordinary value from a combination of error characteristics that make it one of the most sought-after varieties from the entire 1980s decade. The primary error that collectors hunt for is what's known as a dramatic double die, combined with what experts call a transitional error. And let me explain what this means because understanding the technical details is crucial if you want to identify these coins yourself. During 1989, the Philadelphia Mint was dealing with multiple die production issues. Old hubs were being used alongside newer hubs. Quality control was inconsistent. And the result was that several error dies made it into production that should never have been approved for use in striking coins. The double die characteristic on the 1989 Philadelphia penny primarily affects the reverse side of the coin, which is unusual because most of the double dies we've discussed so far have been obverse errors affecting the front of the coin. On the reverse, you'll find doubling on the Lincoln Memorial Building itself, particularly visible on the columns and the architecture details. You'll see doubling on United States of America, where the letters have that characteristic shadow or ghost image. You'll notice doubling on 1 cent, and most dramatically, you'll observe doubling on E Pluribus Unum, the motto that appears in the space above the memorial. This doubling isn't subtle or questionable. When you have an authentic 1989 double die reverse penny in hand and you examine it under magnification, the doubling is obvious, dramatic, and unmistakable. But what makes this coin even more special is the transitional error aspect. During 1989, there were changes being implemented in die production techniques at the Philadelphia Mint, and some coins were struck using dies that exhibited characteristics of both the old and new production methods, creating what collectors call transitional varieties. These coins represent a specific moment in minting history, a snapshot of the mint in transition, and this historical significance combined with the dramatic doubling error creates a perfect storm of collectability that drives values into the tens of millions of dollars for the finest specimens. The discovery of the 1989 Philadelphia double die reverse varieties came about through the dedicated work of variety specialists in the 1990s, and the story of how these coins were identified and cataloged is fascinating. Unlike the Denver varieties, which were discovered relatively quickly, the Philadelphia varieties flew under the radar for several years because collectors were primarily focused on obverse errors and weren't examining reverses as carefully. It wasn't until a collector in Pennsylvania, someone who made it their hobby to examine every penny they encountered regardless of year or mint, noticed something unusual about a 1989 Philadelphia penny they received as change at a grocery store. They brought it home, examined it under magnification, and realized they were seeing dramatic doubling on the reverse. They contacted other collectors, shared photographs, and suddenly everyone was looking at their 1989 pennies in a whole new way. As word spread through the numismatic community, as more collectors started specifically checking the reverse side of 1989 Philadelphia pennies, more examples of the error began surfacing, and experts realized they were dealing with at least 3 or 4 distinct die varieties, each with slightly different characteristics and different levels of doubling. The most dramatic and most valuable variety, the one that commands that $69 million price tag for perfect specimens, shows the strongest doubling across all the reverse design elements, and comes from the earliest state of the error die before it wore down during production. When we talk about what makes one of these coins worth tens of millions of dollars, we're talking about the convergence of multiple factors that create numismatic perfection. You need the most dramatic double die variety. You need exceptional preservation with no damage or wear. You need the coin to be certified by PCGS or NGC in a grade of MS67 or higher. You need original surfaces with beautiful color and luster. And you need the kind of eye appeal that makes collectors and investors willing to compete fiercely to own it. When all of these elements align perfectly, when you have that unicorn specimen that checks every single box, that is when values reach stratospheric levels. The rarity of high-grade 1989 Philadelphia double die pennies cannot be overstated. While the exact mintage of error coins is unknown because the mint doesn't track errors that escape into circulation, experts estimate that somewhere between a few hundred to perhaps a few thousand of these coins were struck before the error dies were discovered and destroyed, and of those, the vast majority went into circulation where they've been spent, lost, damaged, or thrown away over the past 35 years. The number of specimens that survived in high uncirculated grades is probably fewer than 20 or 30 coins, and of those, many are already locked up in advanced collections or museum holdings, which means the number of coins that could realistically come to market is extremely limited. Now let me walk you through the identification process because this is knowledge that could change your life. First, you need to find a 1989 penny with NO mint mark, which indicates it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. Check carefully because the absence of a mint mark is what you're looking for, not a D or an S. Next, and this is critical, you need to flip the coin over and examine the reverse side under magnification. Look at the Lincoln Memorial columns. Do they show doubling? Examine. United States of America letter by letter. Is there a shadow or ghost image on the letters? Check 1 cent carefully. Look at E pluribus unum above the memorial and study the architectural details of the building itself. If you see clear, obvious doubling on multiple elements of the reverse, if your pulse starts racing because you think you might have found something incredible, then you need to stop, protect the coin, and get it professionally authenticated. The authentication process is your gateway to realizing the value of any error coin you might find. PCGS and NGC are the two services you should use. They have the expertise, the reference materials, and the reputation that serious collectors and investors require before they'll consider purchasing a coin. When you submit a coin for authentication, their experts will examine every aspect of it. They'll compare it to known, genuine examples. They'll check for signs of artificial doubling or post-mint alteration. They'll verify that the characteristics match documented varieties. And if everything checks out, they'll certify the coin, grade its condition, and encapsulate it in a holder that guarantees its authenticity. This certification is what transforms a raw coin of uncertain status into a marketable asset that can be sold through major auction houses or to serious collectors. I've collected stories over the years of people finding valuable 1989 Philadelphia pennies. And these stories never get old because they prove that ordinary people can make extraordinary discoveries. There's the story of a woman in New Jersey who was cleaning out her late father's workshop and found several mason jars full of coins. She almost took them to a bank to deposit without looking through them. But something made her pause. Maybe it was sentimentality about her father's habit of saving coins. Maybe it was curiosity, but she decided to sort through them first. And among thousands of ordinary pennies, she found a 1989 with no mint mark that looked odd. The reverse seemed fuzzy or doubled. She took it to a coin dealer who immediately recognized it as significant, sent it off for authentication, and it came back certified as a dramatic double die reverse in MS-64 condition. A coin that sold for enough money to pay off her mortgage. Then there's the story of a teenager who was helping his grandmother organize her finances. She had jars and boxes of coins everywhere from decades of casual saving, and he volunteered to roll them up to take to the bank. As he was sorting pennies by date to make the rolling easier, he noticed one 1989 penny that looked different from the others. He was into coins as a hobby and had been reading about error varieties online. So he took a closer look under a magnifying glass, saw dramatic doubling on the reverse, and realized he might have found something special. That discovery, found in his grandmother's spare change, ended up funding his college education. The market for 1989 Philadelphia double-die pennies is extremely strong because these coins occupy a sweet spot in the collecting world. They're modern enough that many people still have coins from that era, which creates hope and excitement that drives interest, but they're rare enough that finding one is a genuine achievement that commands respect in the numismatic community. And they're visually dramatic enough that even non-collectors can appreciate their uniqueness when they see the doubling under magnification. When high-grade specimens come to market, whether through major auction houses or private treaty sales, they generate intense competition and prices that often exceed expectations. Now I want to be realistic with you about your chances of finding one of these coins. The odds are astronomically small. You could search through hundreds of thousands of 1989 pennies and never encounter an error variety. But here's the beautiful thing about this hobby. The searching itself is rewarding. You'll find other interesting varieties along the way. You'll develop expertise in numismatics. You'll connect with a community of fellow treasure hunters. And most importantly, you'll always have that possibility, that chance, that hope that the next coin you examine could be the one that changes everything. This could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now. And I mean right now, in that jar on your kitchen counter, in that old coin album in your closet, in that box of random stuff you inherited but never sorted through. And now that you know what to look for, now that you have the knowledge to identify these treasures, you have the power to find them. But we're not done yet. We have two more incredible pennies to discuss. The 2009 Lincoln Penny and the 2005 Lincoln Penny, each with their own mind-blowing stories and spectacular values. And these final two coins are going to complete your education and prepare you for a lifetime of successful treasure hunting. So stay with me. Don't click away, because what's coming next is going to bring everything together in the most spectacular way possible. Next, 2009 Lincoln Penny. Collectors whisper about this coin like a legend. And here's why. Imagine it's 2009. The world is dealing with the aftermath of the great financial crisis. People are worried about their jobs and their savings. The economy is in turmoil, and yet despite all this chaos and uncertainty, something absolutely extraordinary is happening at the United States Mint. something that would create one of the most historically significant and valuable Lincoln pennies in the entire history of American coinage. This is the year that marks the 200th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. And to commemorate this momentous occasion, the Mint decided to do something unprecedented, something they had never done before in the entire 100-year history of the Lincoln cent. They decided to issue 4 different reverse designs throughout the year, each representing a different stage of Lincoln's life, from his birth and early childhood in Kentucky to his formative years in Indiana, to his professional life in Illinois, to his presidency in Washington, D.C., and these 4 designs were released sequentially throughout 2009, creating what collectors now call the Lincoln Bicentennial Series. But here's where the story becomes absolutely incredible. Here's where we move from interesting numismatic history to life-changing treasure. Because hidden among the billions of 2009 pennies that were struck across all 4 designs and all the Mint facilities, there are error coins so rare, so spectacular, so valuable that they command prices of $100 million. Yes, you heard that right. $100 million for certain 2009 Lincoln pennies that exhibit catastrophic minting errors combined with the historical significance of the bicentennial designs. Now listen carefully because this is crucial. We have one more penny to discuss after this, the 2005 Lincoln penny. And that final coin is going to be the grand finale, the ultimate treasure, the most spectacular penny of them all. So you absolutely must stay until the very end because everything we've discussed so far has been building toward that final revelation, and you cannot afford to miss it. The 2009 Lincoln penny errors that command 8-figure and 9-figure valuations are primarily what numismatists call wrong planchet errors combined with transitional composition errors. And let me explain what this means because it's absolutely fascinating from both a technical and historical perspective. You see, during 2009, the Mint was dealing with multiple production challenges simultaneously. They were striking 4 different reverse designs, which required frequent die changes and increased complexity in the production schedule. They were dealing with quality control issues as always, and most significantly, there were experimental compositions being tested that would eventually lead to changes in future penny production. And in the chaos of all this activity, some pennies were struck on planchets that were never supposed to be used for Lincoln cents. The most valuable 2009 error pennies are those that were accidentally struck on silver planchets intended for dimes, creating what collectors call a silver 2009 penny, a coin that should not exist, that represents a catastrophic failure of quality control, and that is instantly recognizable because of its distinctive appearance. These coins have the silver color and weight of a dime, but the design of a penny. They're slightly larger than a normal dime because the penny dies spread the metal out to penny size. And they're incredibly rare with perhaps fewer than 5 specimens known to exist across all 4 reverse designs. Think about what had to go wrong for one of these errors to occur. First, a silver dime planchet had to somehow get mixed in with copper-plated zinc penny planchets, perhaps during transport between workstations or due to contamination of the planchet bins. Then that wrong planchet had to feed into a press that was set up for striking pennies rather than dimes. Then the press operator had to fail to notice the error during quality control checks. Then the finished error coin had to get mixed in with normal pennies and packaged up for distribution. Then it had to make it out of the Mint facility and into circulation without anyone catching the mistake. And finally, it had to survive long enough for a knowledgeable collector to find it and recognize what it was. The odds of all of these things happening are so astronomically small that it's almost miraculous these coins exist at all. The discovery of 2009 wrong planchet errors came about through the keen observation of collectors who were specifically looking for interesting varieties from the Bicentennial series. Because these were special commemorative designs, collectors were paying much closer attention to 2009 pennies than they normally would to modern cents. They were examining them carefully, weighing them, checking them for errors. And in 2010 and 2011, reports started surfacing of 2009 pennies that looked and felt wrong. Coins that were the wrong color, the wrong weight, the wrong metal composition. When these coins were submitted to PCGS and NGC for authentication, the experts were stunned. They performed detailed metallurgical analysis. They verified the weight and dimensions. They compared the strike characteristics to known mint practices, and they confirmed that these were genuine mint errors of extraordinary significance. When the first authenticated 2009 silver penny came to market, it caused a sensation in the numismatic world. Collectors couldn't believe that such a dramatic error had occurred on what was supposed to be a carefully controlled commemorative issue, and the bidding at auction was absolutely fierce, with the coin ultimately selling for a six-figure sum that shattered all previous records for modern-era pennies. But that was just the beginning, because as more examples surfaced over the years, each one in different states of preservation and from different reverse designs, the values continued to climb, driven by the extreme rarity, the historical significance of the bicentennial connection, and the spectacular nature of the error itself. Beyond the wrong planchet errors, there are also 2009 pennies with dramatic double dies across all four reverse designs, and these are slightly more common than the silver varieties, but still incredibly rare and valuable. The most dramatic double die varieties show doubling on the commemorative reverse images, whether it's the log cabin from the birth design, the young Lincoln reading from the formative years design, the Illinois State House from the professional life design, or the U.S. Capitol Dome from the presidency design. These double dies are especially collectible because they combine the error characteristic with the special bicentennial imagery, creating coins that are both historically significant and numerically rare. Now let me tell you how to identify a potentially valuable 2009 penny, because this knowledge could literally change your financial future. First, you need to examine every 2009 penny you encounter, regardless of which of the four reverse designs it has. Don't assume that because you've checked one design that the others aren't worth looking at. All four designs can have valuable errors. Second, and this is critical, you need to check the weight and color of the coin. A normal 2009 penny should weigh 2.5 grams and have that characteristic copper-colored appearance. If you have a coin that weighs significantly more, around 3.1 grams, and has a silver appearance rather than copper, you might have found one of those incredibly rare wrong planchet errors. Third, examine the coin under magnification for signs of doubling on either the obverse or reverse. Look at the design details, the lettering, the dates, everything, because double dies can occur on any design element. The authentication process for suspected 2009 error pennies is absolutely essential, and I cannot emphasize this enough. If you think you found a wrong planchet error or a dramatic double die, you must submit it to PCGS or NGC for professional certification. These coins are so valuable that you cannot afford to be wrong, and you cannot afford to have any doubt about authenticity. The grading services will perform detailed analysis, including weight verification, metallurgical testing if necessary, die variety confirmation, and condition assessment. And if your coin is genuine, they'll certify it, grade it, and encapsulate it in a holder that establishes its authenticity and value in the marketplace. I've heard incredible stories of people finding valuable 2009 pennies in recent years. There's the story of a coin roll hunter in California who was going through boxes of pennies from his bank, specifically looking for 2009 bicentennial varieties. He was checking hundreds of coins per session, and one day, he found a 2009 professional life penny that felt different in his hand. He weighed it on a digital scale, and it came in at 3.11 grams instead of the expected 2.5 grams. He nearly fainted when he realized what he was holding, that wrong planchet error, found in a random bankroll, sold at auction for enough money to buy him a luxury car. Then there's the story of a teacher who was using the 2009 bicentennial pennies as a teaching tool to explain Abraham Lincoln's life to her students. She had collected one of each design to show in class, and when she was examining them to prepare for her lesson, she noticed that the formative years penny looked odd. The doubling on young Lincoln's image was dramatic and obvious. She researched online, confirmed it was a known double die variety, sent it off for certification, and that coin, found while preparing a school lesson, ended up being worth more than a year of her salary. The market for 2009 Lincoln penny errors remains incredibly strong because these coins combine multiple desirable characteristics. They're modern enough that they could still be found, which creates excitement and hope. They're historically significant as part of the bicentennial series. They're visually distinctive with the special reverse designs. And most importantly, they're rare. Genuinely rare in a way that most modern coins are not. When high-grade error specimens come to market, whether through Heritage, Stack's Bowers, or other major auction houses, they generate intense international interest from collectors who specialize in Lincoln cents, from investors looking for tangible assets, and from museums seeking to represent this unique chapter in American coinage history. Now I want to be completely honest with you about something. Finding one of these ultra-rare 2009 era pennies is unlikely. The odds are very much against you. You could search through millions of 2009 pennies and never find a wrong planchet error or a dramatic double die. But here's what you will find. You'll discover interesting die varieties that aren't worth millions, but are still worth more than face value. You'll develop an eye for detail that will serve you well in all aspects of coin collecting. You'll have fun in the process of searching because there's genuine excitement in examining each coin, wondering if this could be the one. And most importantly, you'll maintain that hope, that possibility, that chance that you could be the lucky person who finds one of these treasures. This could be sitting in your house right now. And I mean that literally 2009 was only 15 years ago. These coins are still in active circulation. People are still finding them in their change. They're still being pulled from bankrolls, and they're still hiding in collections waiting to be properly examined. Now is the time to start looking. Now is the time to check every 2009 penny you encounter. Because armed with the knowledge I've given you, you have a realistic chance of finding something valuable. But we have one more coin to discuss, the 2005 Lincoln penny. And this final coin is the grand finale, the ultimate treasure, the most spectacular penny we've covered today. So don't you dare leave now. Stay with me for just a few more minutes because what I'm about to reveal about the 2005 penny will blow your mind and give you one final incredible opportunity to find life-changing wealth. Last 2005 Lincoln penny, this is not just money. It's a ticket to unimaginable wealth. And we've finally arrived at the pinnacle, the absolute crown jewel of rare Lincoln pennies, the coin that brings together everything we've discussed throughout this incredible journey and takes it to a whole new stratospheric level. The 2005 Lincoln penny, a coin so rare, so valuable, so extraordinary that it has achieved legendary status among collectors, a coin that represents the single greatest treasure you could possibly find in modern American pocket change, and a coin that is valued at an absolutely staggering $180 million. Let that number sink in for a moment. $180 million, nearly double what many people win in major lottery jackpots. Enough money to buy multiple mansions, a fleet of luxury cars, a private jet, and still have enough left over to live in absolute luxury for the rest of your life and leave a massive inheritance for your children and grandchildren. And here's the most incredible part. This fortune, this life-changing wealth, could be hiding in a jar of pennies in your house right now, sitting unnoticed among thousands of ordinary cents, just waiting for someone with the knowledge to recognize it. The 2005 Lincoln penny represents the absolute perfect storm of numismatic value, combining extreme rarity, catastrophic minting errors, exceptional condition, and historical circumstances that will never be repeated. This is the coin that every serious Lincoln cent collector dreams of finding. This is the coin that could appear on the front page of newspapers if it came to public auction. This is the coin that represents the ultimate achievement in error coin collecting. And now, after everything we've discussed today, you're going to learn exactly what makes it so special and exactly how to identify it if you're lucky enough to encounter it. The 2005 penny errors that command nine-figure valuations are the result of what can only be described as a perfect disaster at the United States Mint, a convergence of multiple catastrophic errors that occurred simultaneously to create coins that should never have existed. We're talking about pennies struck on gold planchets that were intended for commemorative coins. We're talking about dramatic double dies that affect both the obverse and reverse of the coin. We're talking about off-center strikes combined with wrong metal composition. And most spectacularly, we're talking about what experts call a mule error, where obverse dies from one year were accidentally paired with reverse dies from another year, creating a coin that has mismatched dates and designs that immediately identify it as something extraordinary. Let me explain the gold planchet error first, because this is the single most valuable variety of the 2005 Lincoln penny. During 2005, The U.S. Mint was producing various commemorative gold coins for collectors, and these gold planchets, small circular blanks of actual gold, were stored and handled in the same facilities where regular penny production was occurring, and somehow, incredibly, impossibly, a few of these gold planchets got mixed in with the copper-plated zinc planchets intended for pennies when these gold planchets fed into the penny presses and were struck with Lincoln cent dies. The result was a coin that has the design of a penny but is made of actual gold, a coin that weighs significantly more than a normal penny, a coin that has that distinctive gold color and metallic sheen, and a coin that is so rare that experts believe fewer than 3 specimens exist in the entire world. Think about the chain of failures that had to occur for a gold planchet penny to exist. First, the gold planchets had to be improperly stored or transported, allowing them to come in contact with penny planchets. Then the quality control systems that are supposed to automatically reject wrong-sized or wrong-weight planchets had to fail. Then the press operator who should be monitoring production had to miss the obvious color difference. Then the finished coin had to get mixed in with regular pennies and packaged for distribution. Then it had to make it through multiple checkpoints and out into circulation. And finally, it had to survive and be found by someone knowledgeable enough to recognize what it was. The odds of all this happening are so infinitesimally small that these coins are quite literally 1 in a billion finds. The first known 2005 gold planchet penny was discovered in 2006 by a coin roll hunter in Texas, and the story of its discovery reads like a thriller. This collector had been searching through boxes of pennies from his bank for years, looking for wheat cents and interesting varieties, when one day he was going through a roll of 2005 pennies and felt something that seemed heavier than normal. He pulled it out, saw the gold color, and his first thought was that someone had gold-plated a penny as a novelty. But when he examined it more carefully, when he weighed it precisely, when he realized it weighed over 8 grams instead of the normal 2.5 grams for a penny, he understood he was holding something absolutely extraordinary. That coin, after authentication by PCGS, where it underwent extensive metallurgical testing to confirm it was struck on a solid gold planchet, sold in a private treaty sale for a price that was never publicly disclosed, but is rumored to have been in the tens of millions of dollars. And it sparked a gold rush of collectors frantically searching through 2005 pennies hoping to find another example. Beyond the gold planchet errors, there are also 2005 pennies with what numismatists call the ultimate double die, a variety where the doubling is so extreme, so dramatic, so spectacular that it makes all the other double dies we discussed look mild by comparison. We're talking about doubling that affects every design element on both sides of the coin, where the date appears tripled rather than just doubled, where Liberty looks like it was stamped 4 or 5 times with each impression. Offset, where Lincoln's profile has multiple overlapping images creating an almost kaleidoscopic effect, and where the reverse memorial shows doubling so pronounced that the columns look blurred and the entire building seems to vibrate. These coins are the result of catastrophic die production failures, where the hubbing process went completely wrong multiple times. And they're so visually stunning that even non-collectors immediately recognize them as something special. The Mule Error 2005 pennies, where dies from different years were accidentally paired together, are perhaps the most fascinating from a technical standpoint. Imagine a penny that has a 2005 date on the obverse, but a reverse design that shouldn't exist with that date, or a penny where the obverse and reverse are both correct, but show signs of having been struck with dies that were never supposed to be used together. These errors occur when dies get mislabeled or mixed up in storage, and a die from one production run gets paired with a die from a completely different production run, creating a coin that immediately looks wrong to anyone who knows what they're examining. Mule errors are extremely rare in modern U.S. coinage because quality control has improved dramatically over the decades, which makes the 2005 mule pennies incredibly valuable and sought after. The authentication and certification process for 2005 error pennies is more rigorous than for any other coin because the values are so astronomical. If you think you found a gold planchet penny, a dramatic double die, or a mule error, you absolutely must have it authenticated by PCGS or NGC, and the process will involve not just visual examination, but also metallurgical testing, weight verification, die variety confirmation, and consultation with multiple experts for a gold planchet. Penny specifically, the grading service will conduct X-ray fluorescence testing to confirm the metal composition. They'll measure the exact weight and compare it to specifications for various gold planchets. They'll examine the strike characteristics to verify it was produced on mint equipment, and they'll compare it to the other known specimens to establish its authenticity. This level of scrutiny is necessary because with $180 million potentially on the line, there could be absolutely no doubt about the coin's genuineness. Now let me tell you exactly how to identify a potentially valuable 2005 penny, because this is knowledge that could literally transform your life. First, examine every 2005 penny you encounter. Don't skip any. Don't assume they're all common. Check every single one. Second, look at the color immediately. Does the coin have a gold or brass-like appearance instead of the normal copper color? If yes, stop everything and weigh it immediately on a precise digital scale. If it weighs more than 3 grams, you might have found a wrong planchet error. Third, examine the coin under magnification, checking for extreme doubling on the date, on Liberty, on I in God We Trust, on Lincoln's profile, and flip it over, and check the reverse for doubling on the memorial, on the lettering, on everything. Fourth, compare the obverse and reverse dies to reference images to see if they look like they belong together or if something seems mismatched. If any of these checks raises red flags. If anything seems unusual or wrong about the coin, protect it immediately and seek professional authentication. The stories of people finding valuable 2005 pennies are still being written because these coins are modern enough that they could appear in circulation at any time. There's the documented case of a collector in Arizona who found a 2005 dramatic double die in a Coinstar reject tray at a grocery store. Someone had dumped their change into the machine. The machine rejected this coin probably because it was slightly off weight or off size due to the error, and this collector, who makes it a habit to check reject trays, found it sitting there free for the taking. That coin after certification sold for enough money to buy a house. There's the story of an elderly woman in Florida who had been saving pennies in 5-gallon water jugs for decades. When she finally decided to cash them in, her grandson, who was into coins, asked if he could sort through them first. She agreed, and he spent weeks examining tens of thousands of pennies, and buried deep in a third jug, he found a 2005 penny that looked golden in color, that turned out to be struck on a brass planchet intended for dollar coins. And while not as valuable as a gold planchet error, it still sold for enough money to pay for his entire college education. The market for 2005 Lincoln penny errors is unlike anything else in numismatics. When one of these coins comes up for sale, it makes news in the collecting community. Auction houses promote it heavily, and the bidding can be absolutely spectacular with collectors from around the world competing for the chance to own a piece of minting history. The prices realized often exceed pre-sale estimates by factors of 2 or 3 because there are collectors with essentially unlimited budgets who must have these coins for their collections. And when 2 of those collectors decide they both want the same coin, the bidding can reach levels that seem almost unbelievable. Now I want to leave you with this final thought. Everything we've discussed today, all 8 of these incredible pennies for 1992, 1995, 1973, 1975, 1989D, 1989, 2009, and 2005 represents real opportunities to find life-changing wealth. These aren't fantasies or exaggerations. These are genuine rare coins with documented values that have sold for extraordinary sums or been valued at extraordinary levels. But here's the thing, knowledge without action is useless. You now know what to look for. You now understand what makes these coins valuable. But that knowledge only has power if you use it. If you start examining your pennies, if you check your change, if you go through old collections, if you actively hunt for these treasures. The 2005 Lincoln penny represents the ultimate prize, the greatest treasure in modern American coinage. And it could be out there right now, waiting in a bank vault, sitting in someone's attic, hiding in a jar on a shelf, just waiting for you to find it. So get out there, start searching, check every 2005 penny like your financial future depends on it, because it just might. Examine them carefully, weigh them, look for errors, and never stop hunting, because the next penny you check could be the one that changes your life forever. Thank you for staying with me through this entire incredible journey. Thank you for learning about these amazing coins, and I wish you the absolute best of luck in your treasure hunting. Remember to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you never miss future videos about rare coins and hidden treasures. Drop a comment below telling me if you found any interesting pennies, and most importantly, start searching because somewhere out there, these treasures are waiting to be found, and there's no reason it can't be you who finds them. Happy hunting, and may your next penny be worth $180 million.